Welcome. We assume you need some gentle help with nodding off, so you have made an excellent decision to listen to a compilation of facts that have been combined to create this masterpiece, The History of Christmas to Make You Sleep. Without further ado, on to Part 1, Ancient Roots and Early Beginnings. Settle in, close your eyes if you wish, and let us drift back through time, back beyond the twinkling lights and wrapped presents, beyond the carols and the evergreen trees, to discover how Christmas came to be. Long before December 25th meant anything at all to anyone, the darkest days of winter held their own kind of magic. In the northern hemisphere, as the sun's arc grew shorter and the nights stretched longer, ancient peoples watched and waited. They celebrated the winter solstice, that pivotal moment around December 21st or 22nd when the sun reaches its lowest point in the sky and then, miraculously, begins its return. The Romans called this celebration Saturnalia, a raucous festival honoring Saturn, the god of agriculture, which lasted from December 17th through the 23rd. During Saturnalia, social norms were upended, schools and businesses closed, gambling was permitted, and masters might even serve their slaves. People exchanged gifts, feasted lavishly, and decorated their homes with greenery. But the Romans had another celebration too. On December 25th itself, they honored Sol Invictus, the unconquerable sun, a festival established by Emperor Aurelian in 274 AD to celebrate the sun god and mark the sun's rebirth after the winter solstice. Meanwhile, in the Germanic lands of northern Europe, people celebrated Yule, a midwinter festival where families burned great logs, the Yule log, to ward off evil spirits and bring light back into the world. The log would burn for 12 days, and its ashes were kept as protection throughout the year. Now, as Christianity began to spread through the Roman Empire in the first few centuries after Christ's birth, early Christians did not celebrate Christmas at all. The Bible never mentions the date of Jesus' birth, and in fact, the circumstances described in the Gospels, shepherds watching their flocks by night in the fields, suggest a spring birth was more likely than a winter one. For the first 3 centuries of Christianity, believers focused instead on Easter, the celebration of Christ's resurrection, which they considered far more theologically significant. It wasn't until the 4th century that church leaders began to establish December 25th as the date to commemorate Christ's birth. The earliest known reference to December 25th as Christmas appears in a Roman almanac from 336 AD, during the reign of Emperor Constantine, who had converted to Christianity and made it the favored religion of the empire. Scholars believe the Church chose this date deliberately, strategically overlaying Christian meaning onto existing pagan festivals. By Christianizing the popular Roman celebrations of Saturnalia and Sol Invictus, church leaders hoped to ease the transition for converts who were accustomed to celebrating during this time of year. The word Christmas itself comes from the Old English Christ's Mess, meaning Christ's Mass, a term that emerged around the 11th century. But in those early medieval centuries, Christmas was celebrated quite differently to how it is today. It was primarily a religious feast day, marked by church services and modest observances. There were no Christmas trees, no Santa Claus, no elaborate gift-giving traditions. Instead, the 12 days from December 25th to January 6th, the Epiphany, when the 3 wise men, Magi, were said to have visited the infant Jesus, became a period of religious reflection and communal feasting. In medieval Europe, Christmas gradually evolved into a season where the normal social order was temporarily inverted, much like the ancient Saturnalia. A lord of misrule might be appointed to preside over festivities, where servants became masters and revelry was encouraged. The celebration often resembled a carnival more than the quiet, family-centered holiday we know today. And so, from these ancient roots, the Roman festivals, the Germanic Yule, the Church's strategic adoption of December 25th, the foundations of Christmas were slowly laid. What began as scattered winter celebrations across different cultures would gradually weave together into something new, something that would travel across centuries and continents, transforming along the way. Part 2, medieval traditions and the Reformation's shadow. As we journey forward through the centuries, Christmas begins to take on shapes and colors that would seem more familiar to us now, though still quite different from our modern celebrations. Let yourself drift along this river of history, where each century adds its own tributaries to the stream. In medieval England, Christmas became a time of great feasting and generosity. The wealthy would open their halls to the poor, providing food and entertainment in a spirit of charity and goodwill. This tradition of hospitality was considered a sacred duty, and those who failed to be generous during Christmastide were looked upon with disapproval. Enormous feasts featured roasted meats. Boar's head was particularly prized, along with elaborate pies, puddings, and spiced wines. The celebration emphasized community and the temporary dissolution of social boundaries, where rich and poor might share the same table, if only for a day. But not everyone embraced Christmas with such enthusiasm. In the 1640s and 1650s, the Puritans in England and the early American colonies actually banned Christmas celebrations. They viewed the holiday as a corrupt, papist tradition with pagan roots, and they found no biblical mandate for its observance. In 1644, the English Parliament passed a law making December 25th a regular working day and forbidding any special church services. In the Massachusetts Bay Colony, a law passed in 1659 made celebrating Christmas a criminal offense, punishable by a fine of 5 shillings. Anyone caught feasting or taking the day off from work could be prosecuted. This ban remained in effect for more than 20 years. The Puritan opposition to Christmas reflected a deep suspicion of its rowdy, secular elements. By the 17th century, Christmas had indeed become associated with drunkenness, gambling, and sometimes even vandalism, particularly in the form of wassailing, where groups would go door to door demanding food and drink, sometimes becoming threatening if refused. The word wassail comes from the Old Norse vs heil, meaning be in good health, and the tradition involved drinking from a communal bowl of spiced ale or cider while singing songs. After the restoration of the English monarchy in 1660, Christmas celebrations gradually returned, though they never quite regained their former prominence immediately. For many years, Christmas remained a relatively minor holiday in Britain and America, often just a day off from work with perhaps a church service and a modest meal. It wasn't until the 19th century that Christmas truly began its transformation into the holiday we recognize today. In 1843, Charles Dickens published A Christmas Carol, a novella that would fundamentally reshape how the English-speaking world thought about Christmas. Dickens's story of Ebenezer Scrooge emphasized charity, family togetherness, and the Christmas spirit of redemption and goodwill. The book was an immediate sensation, selling out its first edition of 6,000 copies by Christmas Eve. Dickens's vision of Christmas, warm, family-centered, generous, and sentimental, captured the Victorian imagination and helped establish many of the values we now associate with the holiday. Around the same time, Christmas was being reimagined in America as well. In 1870, Christmas was declared a federal holiday in the United States, a recognition of its growing cultural importance. This official sanction helped transform Christmas from a religious observance that some celebrated and others shunned into a shared national celebration. The 19th century also saw the emergence of Christmas cards. The first commercial Christmas card was created in London in 1843, the same year A Christmas Carol was published, by Sir Henry Cole, who commissioned artist John Calcott Horsley to design a card he could send to friends and acquaintances instead of writing individual letters. The card depicted a family raising their glasses in a toast, with the message, "A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you." 1,000 copies were printed and sold for a shilling each. The idea caught on, and by the 1860s, Christmas cards were being mass-produced, helping to spread Christmas greetings far and wide and reinforcing the holiday's emphasis on maintaining social bonds and expressing goodwill. So you see, Christmas was being reborn in the Victorian era, no longer the raucous, sometimes anarchic medieval festival, nor the banned and suppressed holiday of the Puritans, but something gentler, more domestic, more sentimental. It was becoming a celebration of home and hearth, of family gathered together against the winter cold, of generosity and good cheer. Part 3. Trees, Gifts, and the Spirit of Giving. Now let us turn our attention to some of the most beloved symbols of Christmas, the ones that fill our homes with light and wonder, with fragrance and color. Close your eyes and imagine the glow of candles on evergreen branches, the rustle of paper and ribbon, the magic that transforms an ordinary room into something enchanted. The Christmas tree, so central to our modern celebrations, has its own remarkable journey through history. The tradition of bringing evergreen trees indoors during winter stretches back to those ancient peoples we spoke of earlier, but the decorated Christmas tree as we know it began in Germany. As early as the 16th century, devout Christians in Germany brought decorated trees into their homes. A popular legend credits Martin Luther, the Protestant reformer, with adding lighted candles to a tree around 1536, inspired by the beauty of stars twinkling through evergreen branches as he walked home one winter evening. Whether or not Luther truly was the first, Germans were certainly decorating trees with candles, nuts, and fruit by the 1600s. The Christmas tree tradition remained primarily Germanic for centuries, until England's Queen Victoria and Prince Albert brought it into the mainstream of English-speaking culture. In 1848, the Illustrated London News published a drawing of the royal family gathered around their Christmas tree at Windsor Castle. Prince Albert, who was German, had introduced the custom to the royal household, and when the British public saw their beloved queen celebrating with a decorated tree, the practice spread rapidly throughout Britain and its empire. The image was later republished in America, and by the 1850s and 1860s, Christmas trees were becoming fashionable in American homes as well. But trees needed ornaments, and here two traditions evolved. In the German town of Losche, skilled glassblowers began creating delicate glass ornaments in the 1840s and 1850s. These beautiful baubles, initially shaped like fruits, nuts, and other natural objects, transformed Christmas trees into glittering works of art. By the late 19th century, German glass ornaments were being exported around the world, making decorated trees accessible to families of various means. Now, what of gift giving? This tradition, too, has deep and winding roots. In ancient Rome, people exchanged gifts during Saturnalia, as we mentioned earlier. But the Christian tradition of Christmas gifts has several sources. One is the story of the Magi bringing gold, frankincense, and myrrh to the infant Jesus, a tale that emphasized the spirit of offering precious gifts. In medieval Europe, gifts were more commonly exchanged on New Year's Day or on the feast of St. Nicholas, December 6th, rather than on Christmas Day itself. The Netherlands had a particularly strong tradition of gift-giving associated with Sinterklaas, St. Nicholas, who was said to arrive from Spain on a steamboat in mid-November and deliver presents to good children on December 5th, the eve of his feast day. Dutch settlers brought this tradition to New Amsterdam, which later became New York. In 1809, Washington Irving published a history of New York, which included descriptions of the Dutch custom of St. Nicholas flying over rooftops in a wagon and dropping gifts down chimneys. This whimsical image began to capture American imaginations. Then, in 1823, a poem appeared that would transform Christmas forever. Published anonymously in a New York newspaper, A Visit from St. Nicholas, now better known as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, was later attributed to Clement Clarke Moore, though some scholars debate this attribution. The poem created an entirely new image of St. Nicholas, a jolly, rotund figure in fur who drove a sleigh pulled by 8 named reindeer: Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donder, and Blitzen. This street Nicholas came down chimneys to fill stockings with toys, and he had a belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. The poem was reprinted countless times and became deeply embedded in American culture, fundamentally shifting Christmas toward a child-centered celebration focused on gift-giving and magic. The visual image of Santa Claus continued to evolve. In the 1860s and 1870s, the political cartoonist Thomas Nast created illustrations of Santa for Harper's Weekly magazine, depicting him as a round, cheerful man with a white beard, dressed in a red suit trimmed with white fur. Nast also established many other elements of Santa mythology: his workshop at the North Pole, his list of naughty and nice children, and his reading of letters from children around the world. These illustrations solidified the image of Santa Claus in the popular imagination, creating the figure we instantly recognize today. And so, piece by piece, the Christmas we know took shape: the glittering tree, the exchanging of wrapped gifts, the anticipation of a magical visitor who rewarded goodness with generosity. These traditions, born from older customs and reimagined through poetry and art, wove themselves into the fabric of celebration. Part 4: Carols, Customs, and Global Celebrations. Let us turn now to the sounds of Christmas, those melodies that drift through shopping centers and echo in churches, that we hum without thinking and sing together by candlelight. And let us wander, too, across borders and oceans, to see how different cultures have embraced and transformed this December celebration into something uniquely their own. Christmas carols have a history as rich and layered as any other element of the holiday. The word carol originally referred to a circle dance accompanied by singing, popular in medieval Europe. Early Christmas carols were often sung in Latin by clergy, but in the 13th century, Saint Francis of Assisi began encouraging the use of nativity plays and popular songs in native languages to make the Christmas story accessible to common people. This helped create a tradition of folk carols sung in local tongues throughout Europe. Many of our most beloved carols emerged in the 19th century, during that same Victorian revival that transformed so much of Christmas. Silent Night, perhaps the world's most famous Christmas carol, was written in 1818 in the small Austrian village of Oberndorf. The story goes that the church organ had broken down, so Father Joseph Moore wrote the words and asked Franz Xaver Gruber, the local schoolmaster and organist, to compose a melody that could be played on guitar. The carol was first performed at Christmas Eve Mass with guitar accompaniment, and it gradually spread across Europe and then the world, eventually being translated into more than 140 languages. Hark! The Herald Angels Sing was written in 1739 by Charles Wesley, brother of John Wesley, the founder of Methodism. However, the stirring melody we know today wasn't added until 1855, when it was adapted from a composition by Felix Mendelssohn. O Come, All Ye Faithful has more mysterious origins. It may date from the 13th century or may have been written in the 1740s, and scholars still debate its authorship. What we do know is that these carols, along with many others, became standard parts of Christmas celebrations during the Victorian era, sung in homes, churches, and public gatherings. Now let us drift across the Atlantic to see how Christmas evolved in America through the 20th century. In 1931, the Coca-Cola Company commissioned illustrator Haddon Sundblom to create advertising images of Santa Claus for their winter campaigns. Sundblom painted a warm, grandfatherly Santa in red and white, colors that matched the company's branding. While Santa had worn red before in Thomas Nast's illustrations, Sundblom's paintings, which appeared in magazines and on billboards for more than 3 decades, cemented this particular image in the global consciousness and helped standardize Santa's appearance worldwide. Christmas in America became increasingly commercialized throughout the 20th century. Department stores began creating elaborate Christmas window displays in the late 1800s, and by the 1920s and 1930s, stores were featuring Santa Claus in residence, where children could visit and tell him their wishes. The day after Thanksgiving gradually became established as the unofficial start of the Christmas shopping season, a tradition that continues today. But Christmas has never been just an American or European holiday. It has spread and adapted to cultures around the world, each adding their own beautiful variations. In Mexico and much of Latin America, Las Posadas is celebrated during the 9 nights before Christmas, reenacting Mary and Joseph's search for lodging in Bethlehem. Families processed through neighborhoods, singing and asking for shelter at houses along the way, until finally being welcomed in for celebration and traditional foods. In the Philippines, which has one of the longest Christmas seasons in the world, beginning in September and lasting until January, the Simbang Gabi tradition involves attending dawn masses on the 9 days leading up to Christmas. Homes and streets are decorated with colorful parole, star-shaped lanterns that symbolize the Star of Bethlehem. In Japan, where Christians make up less than 2% of the population, Christmas has become popular as a secular celebration. A peculiar tradition has emerged, eating Kentucky Fried Chicken on Christmas Eve, a custom that began with a successful marketing campaign in the 1970s and now sees families ordering their Christmas KFC weeks in advance. In Ethiopia, where the Orthodox Church uses the Julian calendar, Christmas, called Gana, is celebrated on January 7th. Celebrants dress in white traditional garments and attend church services that can last for 3 hours, followed by a feast. In Australia, where Christmas falls during summer, families often celebrate with barbecues on the beach, and some communities hold carols by candlelight concerts in outdoor venues under the stars. Each culture has woven its own threads into the tapestry of Christmas, creating something both universal and deeply local, both shared and unique. The holiday has become a global phenomenon, celebrated in countless ways, yet always carrying echoes of those ancient winter festivals, those longings for light and warmth and togetherness in the darkest time of the year. Part 5: Traditions of Light, Food, and Modern Magic. As we continue our gentle journey through Christmas history, let us explore the traditions that bring warmth and light to the darkest season, the foods that have become inseparable from celebration, and the modern customs that now feel timeless, though they are more recent than we might imagine. Christmas lights have illuminated the holiday for centuries, though their form has changed dramatically. Those candles that Germans placed on their Christmas trees in the 16th and 17th centuries were beautiful but dangerous. Many house fires resulted from this practice. Then, in 1882, just 3 years after Thomas Edison invented the practical light bulb, his business partner Edward H. Johnson hand-wired 80 red, white, and blue electric light bulbs and strung them around his Christmas tree in New York City. This dazzling display was reported in newspapers, though electric lights remained far too expensive for ordinary families. It wasn't until 1903 that the first commercially produced Christmas lights became available, and even then they cost a small fortune, the equivalent of several $100s in today's money for a single string of lights. The democratization of Christmas lights came gradually. In 1917, a 15-year-old boy named Albert Sadaka convinced his parents, who owned a novelty lighting company, to manufacture electric Christmas lights for the mass market. By the 1920s and 1930s, strings of colored bulbs were becoming affordable for middle-class families, and the tradition of decorating homes with electric lights began to spread. The spectacle grew brighter each decade, evolving from simple strings on trees to elaborate outdoor displays that can now be seen from space during the holiday season. Now, let us turn to the table, where Christmas feasts have their own delicious histories. The Christmas pudding, also known as plum pudding, has been a British tradition since the medieval period, though it has evolved considerably. In Victorian England, the pudding became especially significant. Families would make it weeks before Christmas, and tradition held that every family member should take a turn stirring the mixture from east to west, in honor of the Magi, while making a wish. Small silver coins, charms, or a silver sixpence would be hidden inside, and finding one in your slice was considered good luck. The pudding would be doused with brandy and set aflame before serving, creating a spectacular blue flame at the Christmas table. In Germany and throughout Central Europe, Stollen, a dense, sweet bread filled with dried fruits, nuts, and marzipan, has been a Christmas tradition since the 15th century. In Dresden, there's a centuries-old celebration called the Stollenfest, and the city even maintains a record of Stollen baking dating back to 1474. Meanwhile, in Scandinavia, families prepare elaborate spreads of smorgasbord or julbord, festive buffets featuring dishes like pickled herring, gravlax, meatballs, and rice pudding. The Swedish tradition includes hiding a single almond in the rice pudding, and whoever finds it is said to have good fortune in the coming year. The candy cane, now such an iconic Christmas treat, has uncertain origins, but one popular story dates to 1670 in Cologne, Germany. According to legend, a choirmaster at the Cologne Cathedral gave sugar sticks bent into the shape of shepherd's crooks to children attending the lengthy Christmas nativity services, both to keep them quiet and to remind them of the shepherds who visited baby Jesus. The candy remained white for more than 200 years. The red stripes we associate with candy canes today didn't appear until the early 20th century, and the first machine to automate candy cane production wasn't invented until 1921 by a Georgia candy maker named Bob McCormick, whose brother-in-law, a Catholic priest named Gregory Keller, invented the twisting machine. In more recent times, new traditions have emerged that feel as though they've always existed. The idea of leaving milk and cookies for Santa Claus became popular in America during the Great Depression of the 1930s. Parents wanted to teach children the importance of showing gratitude and sharing what they had, even during hard times, so the practice of leaving treats for Santa, and perhaps carrots for his reindeer, took root. This simple gesture of generosity, born from scarcity, became a cherished ritual passed down through generations. The Christmas movie tradition, too, is more recent than we often realize. While holiday films existed earlier, it was Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life, released in 1946, that truly established the genre. Though initially only a modest success at the box office, the film's copyright lapsed in the 1970s, allowing television stations to broadcast it freely and repeatedly. Through this accident of copyright law, it became a beloved staple of Christmas television, watched by millions of families each year, its message of community, redemption, and the value of ordinary lives resonating across decades. And so the traditions layer upon one another, ancient and modern, solemn and playful, sacred and secular. Each generation adds its own customs while preserving the old, creating a holiday that is at once deeply rooted in history and continually renewed, always changing yet somehow always recognizably Christmas. Part 6, Music, Miracles, and the Modern Season. Let us drift now into the realm of Christmas music and the stories behind the melodies that have become the soundtrack of the season. Let the gentle rhythms of history carry you along as we explore how songs and celebrations have shaped our modern Christmas experience. In 1942, during the dark days of World War II, a songwriter named Irving Berlin wrote White Christmas for the film Holiday Inn, starring Bing Crosby. The song, with its nostalgic longing for snow-covered Christmases and simpler times, struck a profound chord with a world at war. Soldiers far from home, families separated by conflict, and a nation yearning for peace found solace in its gentle melody. Bing Crosby's recording became the best-selling single of all time, with estimated sales of over 50 million copies worldwide. The song transcended its era, becoming an enduring symbol of Christmas itself, not of religious celebration, but of homecoming, memory, and the ache of longing for beloved places and people. Just a few years later, in 1949, another Christmas standard was born from personal tragedy. Gene Autry, the famous singing cowboy, recorded Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, based on a story written in 1939 by Robert L. May for the Montgomery Ward Department Store. May had created Rudolph during a difficult time. His wife was dying of cancer, and he needed to support his young daughter while paying mounting medical bills. The story of the misfit reindeer who becomes a hero resonated deeply, perhaps because May himself felt like an outsider struggling against hardship. When Autry's recording was released, it sold 2 million copies in its first year and went on to become one of the best-selling Christmas songs ever, spawning the beloved 1964 stop-motion television special that continues to air each year. The 1960s brought Christmas music into new territory. In 1963, Phil Spector produced A Christmas Gift for You, an album featuring various artists performing Christmas songs with his signature wall of sound production style. Though initially overlooked due to its release just days after President Kennedy's assassination, the album later became recognized as a masterpiece and helped establish the tradition of pop and rock artists recording Christmas albums. This trend continued and expanded, with everyone from Elvis Presley to Mariah Carey eventually contributing their voices to the Christmas music canon. Speaking of Mariah Carey, her 1994 song All I Want for Christmas Is You has become a modern Christmas phenomenon. Written and recorded in just 15 minutes according to some accounts, though the production took longer, the song has become one of the most profitable Christmas songs ever written. Each year, it resurges on the charts, introducing new generations to its jubilant melody and making it a bridge between classic Christmas music and contemporary pop culture. Now let us consider the Christmas television specials that have become as much a part of the holiday as any ancient tradition. In 1965, A Charlie Brown Christmas aired for the first time, and network executives were convinced it would fail. The special featured a jazz soundtrack by Vince Guaraldi, child actors voicing the characters instead of professional voice actors, and an overtly religious ending where Linus recites the nativity story from the Gospel of Luke. CBS executives thought it was too slow, too different, and too religious for mainstream audiences. They were spectacularly wrong. The special attracted nearly half of all American television viewers that night and has aired every year since, becoming one of the longest-running television traditions in American history. The tradition of the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree in New York City has its own heartwarming origin. During the Great Depression in 1931, construction workers building Rockefeller Center pooled their money to buy a 20-foot balsam fir tree, which they decorated with homemade garlands made from cranberries and paper. They placed it at the construction site as a symbol of hope during those difficult times. 2 years later, in 1933, the first official tree lighting ceremony was held, and it has continued every year since, growing into a massive celebration that attracts hundreds of thousands of visitors and is watched by millions on television. In 1947, Toys for Tots was established by Marine Corps Reserve Major Bill Hendricks and his wife Diane. Unable to find an organization to donate a handmade doll to a needy child, Diane convinced her husband to create one. He gathered a group of Marine reservists in Los Angeles who collected and distributed 5,000 toys that first Christmas. The program went national the following year and has since distributed over 600 million toys to children in need, becoming one of the most recognizable Christmas charity programs in America. The tradition of the National Christmas Tree Lighting Ceremony in Washington, D.C., began in 1923 when President Calvin Coolidge lit a 48-foot fir tree with 2,500 electric bulbs on the ellipse near the White House. This ceremony, broadcast on radio and later television, has continued through wars, economic hardships, and national tragedies, serving as a moment when Americans gather, whether in person or virtually, to mark the beginning of the Christmas season together. And so we see how the 20th century wove Christmas deeper into the fabric of modern life, through music that captured collective longing and joy, through television programs that created shared cultural moments, through public celebrations that brought communities together, and through acts of generosity that reminded us of the season's deeper meanings. These newer traditions, barely a century old, feel as timeless as any carol from the Middle Ages. Part 7, Saints, Symbols, and the Season's Deeper Meanings. As we continue our journey through Christmas history, let us explore some of the quieter stories, the saints and symbols that have carried meaning through the centuries, and the ways this holiday has connected people to something larger than themselves. Saint Nicholas himself, the figure who inspired so many of our gift-giving traditions, was a real person who lived in the 4th century in what is now Turkey. Nicholas was the Bishop of Myra, known for his exceptional generosity and love for children. The most famous legend about him tells of a poor man with 3 daughters who had no dowries and thus no hope of marriage. Nicholas secretly threw 3 bags of gold through their window on 3 successive nights, or down their chimney, according to some versions, saving the young women from destitution. In some tellings, the gold landed in stockings or shoes left by the fire to dry, which may explain our tradition of Christmas stockings. Saint Nicholas died on December 6 around the year 343 AD, and his feast day has been celebrated on that date ever since. The poinsettia, that vibrant red and green plant that graces so many homes during Christmas, has its origins in Mexico, where it grows wild and can reach heights of 12 feet. The Aztecs called it Quetzalcoatl and used it for practical purposes. The red bracts produced dye, and the milky sap was used to treat fevers. But it was a 17th century Mexican legend that connected the plant to Christmas. The story tells of a poor girl named Pepita who had no gift to offer the baby Jesus at Christmas Eve services. An angel appeared and told her that even the humblest gift, given with love, would be acceptable. She gathered a handful of roadside weeds and placed them by the church nativity scene, and miraculously, they bloomed into brilliant red poinsettias. The plant was brought to the United States in 1825 by Joel Roberts Poinsett, the first U.S. ambassador to Mexico, and it gradually became associated with Christmas in America, its red and green colors perfectly matching the holiday palette. The tradition of the Advent calendar, now so beloved by children counting down to Christmas, has Germanic Protestant origins. In the 19th century, German families would mark the days of Advent in various ways. Some lit candles, others made chalk marks on doors, and some gave children small gifts or pictures each day. The first printed Advent calendar was created in 1902 or 1903 by a German publisher named Gerhard Lang, who remembered his mother making him a calendar with 24 small candies attached. Lang's printed versions featured small colored pictures behind doors that children could open each day from December 1st through Christmas Eve. The tradition spread slowly, gained popularity in Germany between the World Wars, and then expanded internationally after World War II. Mistletoe, that small plant associated with Christmas kisses, has one of the strangest journeys from ancient ritual to modern tradition. The Druids of pre-Christian Britain and Gaul considered mistletoe sacred, particularly when it grew on oak trees, which was rare. They believed it had the power to heal illnesses and protect against evil. In Norse mythology, mistletoe played a role in the death and resurrection of the god Baldur, after which it became a symbol of love and reconciliation. The kissing tradition likely emerged in 18th century England, where it became customary for a man to kiss a woman standing under mistletoe, plucking a berry from the plant with each kiss. When the berries were gone, the kissing privileges ended. This once sacred plant thus transformed into a playful excuse for stolen kisses at Christmas parties. The nativity scene, or creche, has been a central part of Christmas celebration for centuries, and its origins trace directly back to Saint Francis of Assisi, whom we mentioned earlier. In 1223, Francis wanted to help people understand and feel more connected to the story of Jesus' birth, so he created the first live nativity scene in a cave in the Italian town of Greccio. He brought in a manger, hay, an ox, and a donkey, and held Christmas Mass there, with local people playing the parts of Mary, Joseph, and the shepherds. This theatrical representation of the nativity story was revolutionary. It made the biblical story tangible and immediate. The practice spread rapidly throughout Italy and then across Europe, evolving from live performances to the intricate figurine displays we know today. In Iceland, a unique Christmas tradition involves 13 mischievous characters called the Yule Lads, or Jólasveinar. These folklore figures, who are the sons of trolls, arrive one by one during the 13 nights before Christmas, each with his own distinct personality and prank. One steals sausages, another slams doors, another licks wooden spoons clean. Children leave their shoes on windowsills, and if they've been good, the Yule Lad of the night leaves small gifts. If they've been naughty, they receive a rotten potato. This tradition, which dates back centuries, was officially codified in its current form in the 1930s, and it represents Iceland's unique blend of pagan folklore and Christmas celebration. The Christmas seal, those small decorative stamps people place on holiday cards and letters, was invented in 1903 by a Danish postal worker named Einar Hobel, who wanted to raise money for a children's hospital. His idea was simple: sell decorative seals to the public, with proceeds going to fight tuberculosis, which was devastating children at the time. The first Christmas seals raised enough money to build 2 children's hospitals in Denmark. The idea spread to other countries, and in 1907, the American Red Cross began selling Christmas seals in the United States. Over the following decades, the Christmas Seal campaign raised hundreds of millions of dollars for tuberculosis prevention and treatment. These stories remind us that Christmas is not just one thing but many things woven together, acts of generosity remembered across centuries, plants and symbols transformed by legend and devotion, traditions born from creativity and need, and always, always, the human impulse to mark the darkest season with light, love, and connection. Part 8. Postcards, Protests, and the Universal Spirit. As we continue to wander through the landscape of Christmas history, let us explore how this holiday has been shaped by commerce and conflict, by moments of protest and peace, and by the ways people have both embraced and questioned its meaning over time. The Christmas postcard industry had its golden age in the early 20th century, particularly in the decades before World War I. Between 1905 and 1915, sending Christmas postcards was extraordinarily popular, and people would mail dozens or even hundreds of cards each season. Germany was the center of postcard production, with elaborate cards featuring embossing, glitter, silk appliques, and intricate chromolithography. Some estimates suggest that over 200 million Christmas postcards were mailed in the United States alone during the peak years. The tradition declined after World War I, partly due to the disruption of German manufacturing and partly because longer greeting cards with envelopes became more fashionable, allowing people to write more personal messages. Yet those vintage postcards, with their angels and snow-covered churches and Father Christmas figures, remain treasured collectibles today. The tradition of the Christmas truce during World War I stands as one of the most remarkable moments in Christmas history. On Christmas Eve 1914, just months into the brutal war, German soldiers began placing candles on their trenches and singing Christmas carols. British soldiers responded by singing their own carols. Along various sections of the Western Front, soldiers from both sides began calling out Christmas greetings to each other, and in many places, they emerged from their trenches to meet in no man's land. They exchanged gifts, cigarettes, food, buttons, and even played informal games of football. Some units buried their dead together, holding joint services. The truce was unofficial and spontaneous, lasting a day or several days depending on the location. Military commanders on both sides were disturbed by the fraternization and worked to prevent such truces in subsequent years. But that one Christmas moment revealed the human connections that persisted even amid unimaginable horror. The popularization of Christmas as a consumer holiday accelerated dramatically after World War II. In 1946, the first Toys R Us store concept began forming, though it wouldn't officially open under that name until 1957, marking the beginning of toy store chains that would make shopping for children's gifts a central part of the Christmas experience. The post-war economic boom and the rise of suburban family life created a culture where Christmas gift-giving expanded beyond simple tokens to increasingly elaborate presents, particularly for children. The modern Black Friday shopping phenomenon has its origins in Philadelphia in the 1960s, where police officers used the term to describe the chaos of massive crowds and traffic jams the day after Thanksgiving, when shoppers flooded into the city ahead of the big Army-Navy football game. Retailers initially disliked the negative connotation but eventually embraced the term, reframing it as the day when stores' annual profits moved from the red into the black. By the 1980s and 1990s, Black Friday had become a national retail event, with stores opening earlier each year and offering dramatic doorbusters to attract customers. This commercialization has sparked ongoing debates about the true meaning of Christmas and whether the holiday has strayed too far from its spiritual and communal roots. Not everyone has embraced Christmas universally, and various movements have questioned or resisted the holiday over the years. In the Soviet Union, following the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, Christmas was officially suppressed as a religious holiday. However, the government couldn't suppress people's desire for winter celebration entirely, so they co-opted many Christmas traditions and moved them to New Year's Day instead. Ded Moroz, Grandfather Frost, became the gift bringer, and decorated evergreen trees became New Year's trees. This secular winter celebration allowed people to maintain festive traditions without the religious elements. Even after the fall of the Soviet Union, many former Soviet countries still celebrate New Year's more elaborately than Christmas. In recent decades, discussions about Christmas have become part of broader cultural conversations about inclusivity and pluralism. The phrase Happy Holidays began replacing Merry Christmas in many commercial and public contexts starting in the 1990s and 2000s, intended to be inclusive of people celebrating Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, or no December holiday at all. This shift sparked what some called the War on Christmas, with passionate debates about whether such inclusivity honored diversity or erased Christian tradition. These debates reveal how Christmas, despite, or perhaps because of, its dominance in Western culture, remains a site of negotiation about identity, belief, and belonging. Kwanzaa itself, created in 1966 by Dr. Maulana Karenga in the aftermath of the Watts riots in Los Angeles, represents an intentional creation of new tradition. Dr. Karenga, a professor and activist, designed Kwanzaa as a 7-day celebration from December 26 to January 1 that would honor African American culture and values. Each day focuses on one of 7 principles: unity, self-determination, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, purpose, creativity, and faith. While not a religious holiday and not intended to replace Christmas, Kwanzaa's placement in the holiday season and its emphasis on family, community, and cultural identity has made it part of the December celebration tapestry for many African American families. And so we see that Christmas history is not simply a story of accumulating traditions, but also one of questioning, adapting, and sometimes resisting. It is a holiday that has been commercialized and criticized, embraced and examined, celebrated and secularized. Through all these tensions and transformations, Christmas continues to evolve, shaped by each generation's values, struggles, and dreams. Part 9: Stamps, Stories, and the Season's Enduring Gifts. As we approach the end of our journey through Christmas history, let us explore some final threads in this rich tapestry: the small innovations that became traditions, the stories that captured imaginations, and the ways Christmas has continued to adapt and flourish into our modern age. The first Christmas postage stamp was issued in Canada in 1898, making it a pioneer in commemorative holiday stamps. The stamp featured a map of the British Empire colored in red, with the text Mas 1898 at the bottom, symbolizing the global reach of both the empire and the Christmas holiday. The United States followed much later, not issuing its first Christmas stamp until 1962, when the post office released a stamp featuring a wreath and candles with the words Christmas 1962. There had been resistance to religious imagery on stamps, but the design was deemed sufficiently secular. The following year, in 1963, the U.S. issued a stamp with a more explicitly religious theme, the National Gallery's painting of the Madonna and Child. These stamps became immensely popular, and the tradition of annual Christmas stamps, featuring both religious and secular winter imagery, has continued ever since. The beloved Christmas ballet The Nutcracker had an inauspicious beginning. Composed by Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky and choreographed by Marius Petipa, it premiered in St. Petersburg, Russia, in December 1892. Critics were harsh, calling the ballet confusing and the music inferior to Tchaikovsky's previous works. The composer himself was disappointed with the production. The ballet languished in relative obscurity for decades. It wasn't until 1944, when the San Francisco Ballet staged a complete production, that the Nutcracker began to find its American audience. In 1954, George Balanchine choreographed a new version for the New York City Ballet, which became a sensation. By the 1960s and 1970s, the Nutcracker had become a staple of American Christmas culture, with ballet companies across the country staging productions each December. Today, it's estimated that millions of Americans see the Nutcracker performed live each year, and for many dance companies, ticket sales from this one ballet sustain their operations for the entire year. The tradition of department store window displays reached its artistic peak in the mid-20th century, particularly in New York City. Macy's began creating elaborate Christmas windows in the 1870s, but it was in the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s that these displays became true spectacles. Stores like Macy's, Lord & Taylor, Saks Fifth Avenue, and Bergdorf Goodman competed to create the most imaginative and technically sophisticated animated scenes. These windows featured intricate mechanical figures, elaborate sets, and storylines that unfolded across multiple windows. Families would make pilgrimages to see them, and the tradition of window shopping, literally standing outside to watch the displays, became a cherished part of the Christmas season. While department stores have declined in the age of online shopping, the Christmas window tradition continues in major cities, with crowds still gathering to watch snow fall on miniature villages and mechanical bears ice skate and teddy bears have tea parties. The Hollywood Christmas movie became its own genre, particularly from the 1990s onward. While classic films like Miracle on 34th Street from 1947 and White Christmas from 1954 had established Christmas as fertile ground for cinema, it was the success of films like Home Alone in 1990, which became the highest-grossing live-action comedy of all time, that demonstrated the commercial power of Christmas-themed entertainment. Cable networks like Hallmark Channel, which launched in 2001, built their business models around producing dozens of formulaic but beloved Christmas romance movies each year. By the 2020s, streaming services were producing their own libraries of Christmas content, creating a seemingly infinite supply of holiday viewing options. This abundance of Christmas media has made the holiday even more immersive, allowing people to surround themselves with Christmas music, movies, and imagery from November through December. The advent of artificial Christmas trees represents another significant shift in how Christmas is celebrated. While artificial trees existed as early as the 1880s in Germany, initially made from dyed goose feathers, modern artificial trees made from brush bristles and eventually PVC plastic became popular in the 1960s. The first commercially successful artificial Christmas tree company in America was created by the Addis Brush Company, which used the same machinery that made toilet brushes to manufacture tree branches. Today, it's estimated that approximately 80% of American households that have a Christmas tree use an artificial one. This shift reflects both practical concerns, convenience, allergies, fire safety, and environmental debates about whether cutting down real trees or manufacturing plastic ones is more sustainable. The question of real versus artificial trees has become yet another point where tradition meets modernity, and where personal values shape how people celebrate. The tradition of Christmas charity runs deep, but it was formalized in many ways during the 19th and 20th centuries. The Salvation Army began its tradition of red kettle bell ringers in 1891, when Captain Joseph McPhee wanted to provide a Christmas dinner for the poor in San Francisco. Remembering a large pot in Liverpool, England, where charitable donations were collected, he placed a similar pot at the Oakland ferry landing with a sign reading, "Keep the pot boiling." The first year raised enough money to feed 1,000 people, and the tradition spread nationwide. Today, those red kettles and bell ringers are ubiquitous sights outside stores during the Christmas season, and the Salvation Army's Christmas campaign raises over $100 million annually. This visible reminder of generosity and need has become inseparable from the American Christmas experience. And so we see how Christmas has continued to adapt and grow, incorporating new technologies, new media, new forms of connection and celebration. From postage stamps to ballets, from window displays to streaming services, from real trees to artificial ones, each innovation becomes part of the ever-expanding story of how we mark this season. Part 10: Final Gifts, Modern Wonders and Timeless Meanings. As we arrive at the final part of our journey through Christmas history, let us gather together a few last stories, the modern traditions that have emerged in recent memory, the ways technology has transformed celebration, and perhaps, most importantly, what endures beneath all the change. The Christmas sweater, particularly the ugly Christmas sweater, has its own peculiar history. While people certainly wore festive sweaters in the 1950s and earlier, the sweaters were meant to be genuinely attractive. The shift toward ironic appreciation of garish holiday knitwear began in the 1980s, when thrift stores overflowed with outdated Christmas sweaters featuring three-dimensional pom-pom decorations, sequined reindeer, and oversized snowflakes. By the early 2000s, ugly Christmas sweater parties had become a cultural phenomenon, and by 2010, retailers were manufacturing intentionally ugly sweaters to meet the demand. What began as ironic humor has evolved into genuine affection. Many people now unironically love their outrageous Christmas sweaters, and the tradition has become a way to not take oneself too seriously during the holiday season. The Elf on the Shelf, one of the newest Christmas traditions to achieve widespread adoption, was created in 2005 by Carol Abersold and her daughter Chanda Bell. The book and accompanying elf doll tell the story of scout elves who fly to the North Pole each night to report children's behavior to Santa, then return to a different spot in the house each morning. Parents move the elf nightly, and children aren't allowed to touch it. Within a decade, the Elf on the Shelf had become ubiquitous in American homes, spawning countless social media posts of elaborate elf scenarios, elves having marshmallow fights, making snow angels and flour, zip-lining across living rooms. This tradition, barely 20 years old, demonstrates how quickly new customs can take root. The practice of elaborate Christmas light displays synchronized to music represents a 21st-century evolution of holiday decoration. While outdoor Christmas lights have existed since the early 20th century, computer-controlled displays that flash in time to music, often broadcasting on a local radio frequency for neighbors to tune in, emerged in the early 2000s. These displays can involve tens of thousands of individually programmed lights and require sophisticated software and hundreds of hours of programming. Christmas Day swimming has become a beloved tradition in many countries, though the details vary. In the United Kingdom, Boxing Day swims, December 26th, and Christmas Day dips in frigid waters have been organized since the 19th century, often to raise money for charity. Similar cold water swims happen in Ireland, Canada, the Netherlands, and many other countries. Online shopping has fundamentally transformed Christmas in ways both obvious and subtle. Amazon, founded in 1994, began offering Christmas shopping by its second year. The rise of e-commerce has made it possible to shop for gifts at any hour, compare prices instantly, and have items delivered directly to recipients anywhere in the world. This convenience has changed the rhythm of Christmas preparation. No more fighting crowds at malls, but also fewer chance encounters with neighbors while shopping, fewer opportunities for the kind of spontaneous community interaction that once characterized the Christmas season. Cyber Monday, the online counterpart to Black Friday, was coined in 2005 by the National Retail Federation after they noticed a spike in online shopping on the Monday following Thanksgiving. By 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, online Christmas shopping became not just convenient but necessary for many, accelerating a shift that had been building for decades. The practice of tracking Santa's journey on Christmas Eve has become a beloved modern tradition. It began accidentally in 1955, when a Colorado Springs Sears store printed an advertisement encouraging children to call Santa, but the phone number contained a typo. Instead of reaching Santa, children called the Continental Air Defense Command, CONAD, the predecessor to NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. Colonel Harry Shoup, who was on duty that Christmas Eve, instructed his staff to give children updates on Santa's location. This spontaneous act of kindness became an annual tradition. Today, NORAD Tracks Santa is a sophisticated operation involving volunteers, a website that receives millions of visitors, a mobile app, and partnerships with major technology companies. On Christmas Eve, children worldwide can see real-time updates of Santa's journey, watch videos, play games, and call volunteers to ask about Santa's location. This tradition beautifully combines military technology with childhood wonder, showing how even the most serious institutions can embrace the magic of Christmas. And now, as our journey through Christmas history draws to a close, we find ourselves in the present moment, a time when Christmas is celebrated in more ways, by more people, in more places than ever before. From those ancient winter solstice festivals to today's synchronized light displays and Santa tracking satellites, from humble candles on Germanic trees to millions of electric bulbs visible from space, the holiday has grown and changed while somehow remaining recognizably itself. What endures, perhaps, is not any single tradition but the impulse behind them all, the human need to create light in darkness, to gather with loved ones against the cold, to give gifts and express love, to tell stories and make meaning, to pause in the turning of the year and remember what matters most. Christmas has been many things across its long history, religious and secular, solemn and playful, ancient and modern, global and deeply personal. It is all of these things at once, a living tradition that each generation receives, transforms, and passes on. And so, as you drift towards sleep, may you carry with you not just facts and dates, but a sense of connection to all those who have celebrated before you and all who will celebrate after, a great chain of humanity stretching back through time and forward into the future, all of us seeking warmth, light, love, and meaning in the darkest season of the year. Rest well, and may your own Christmas, however you celebrate it, be filled with peace and wonder.